Hello there, it's Sarah from PaperLovely. Thanks for joining me today. I'm back with part 2 of my 10 cards 1 kit using the Simon Says Stamp Special Edition Mother's Day card kit. So for this second half, I'm going to create some wedding or engagement type theme cards since it's that time of year and the papers that were included lend themselves really well to those type of cards. Since it's been a while since the first part using this card kit, I'm just giving you another quick look at what was included here. So here for my first card, I'm going to use this pretty mint and off-white polka dot paper, and I trimmed that out using my MFT Blueprints 32 frame die. There I gave you a quick look at the stamp set I'll be using for all 5 of these cards, and I'm going to go with the sentiment Tying the Knot. This is a really pretty script, and it has the tails on either end that will run off either side of the card panel. So I started out stamping with Simon Says Stamp Intense Black ink, and you could read it okay, but I wanted it to stand out a little bit more. So what I ended up doing here was I took my Versamark Onyx Black ink and I just used some of my Simon Says Stamp Fine Detail embossing, clear embossing powder, just to make sure that this stood out a little bit better on top of those polka dots. So next I decided I wanted to add an actual knot on the top of that card. So I took my We Are Memory Keepers brad setting tool and I'm just poking some holes through that card panel. I had planned to stitch with some black embroidery floss, and then once I started working with it, I decided I just wanted it to look like a solid string rather than some stitches. So I ended up just taking my embroidery floss down through the very last hole right before the word trying starts, and then up through that hole right after the T in knot. And I'm just gonna run to keep a solid line of that embroidery floss from one end to the other. And here you'll see I'm gonna grab some Post-it tape, and I'll just secure both of those edges along the back of that panel. I'll then trim off that excess there, and then I doubled that over and pulled that through the string on top and just tied that into a double knot. And then once I was happy with that, I'll just trim off the excess, and then I will go ahead and secure that with one of my glue dots. For the inside, I'm working on a Nina panel trimmed to 4x5 1/4, and I went with the sentiment, wishing you lots of happily ever after. And I again went ahead and stamped that using that VersaFine Black Onyx ink. Next, I'll grab that leftover polka dot paper and trim off about a 1/2 inch wide strip, and I'll place that along the bottom of this panel using my ATG gun. For that front panel, I'm going to pop that up using some Scotch foam tape. And then I'll place that down on top of my card base. And this is an MFT gray card base. I can't remember the color at the moment, but I will make sure to link it down below. And I'll place that inside panel on the inside of the card base. Once I was at this point, I realized I forgot that smaller sentiment to go along with tying the knot, so I'm stamping that here. It says, "So you're tying the knot." And that will complete card number 1. For card number 2, I'm using this sort of grayish tan script paper, and I'm trimming that down to 4 by 5 1/4. And then I've got this leftover strip that has the pink stripes and that really pretty floral pattern along the bottom. I'm just trimming that down also to 5 1/4, and I think it measures just about 2 inches, maybe slightly less. So I've added some ATG to the back of that, and I'm gonna add that along just off to the side there on this panel. And then I grabbed my trimmer. My measurements were slightly off, so I'm just taking the smallest sliver off the top and the bottom of that. And then I've attached this to a Nina Desert Storm card panel. I grabbed one of the die cut hearts that came in that Die Cuts with a View pouch, and I'm adding some Nuvo glue to the back of that. And then I decided that I would center the heart between that stripe and the edge of the card panel. So it's not quite in the center, but I made it so that the center of the heart split right down between those two papers. And then I'm going to grab these stickers that came in the kit, and I'm going to use that love sentiment and just add that at an angle there. And I'll finish up the front by adding 3 of those gold heart stickers. For the inside, I'm again using a Nina panel trimmed to 4 by 5 1/4, and I decided to go with just the portion of that sentiment that says Happily Ever After, and I'm stamping that out using Lawn Fawn Peachy Keen ink. I'll go ahead then and attach that to the inside of my card base. And then I felt like it needed a little something more, so I grabbed some floral pattern paper that matches really well with the floral on the front, trimmed that down to 4 inches wide. Yep. And then I'll add that using my ATG gun to the bottom of that white panel. And that will complete card number 2. For card number 3, I'm using this really pretty peachy pink paper that has some gold splatter along the bottom, and I wanted to keep as much of that as I could. So there you'll see I'm using my Blueprints 32 frame die, and I just lined that up right along the edge. Here I'm going to go with the sentiment Congratulations. This is a gorgeous scripty sentiment. And I'm going to emboss this with some gold Recollections embossing powder. So there I've used my anti-static tool, and here I'm grabbing my Versamark ink and making sure to ink that up really well. I went ahead and heat set that off camera, and then because I know I want to pop up that panel, I'm going to go ahead and do my inside sentiment next. I'm using the off-white or cream colored paper that came in the kit, and I'm stamping the sentiment Mr. and Mrs. using Lawn Fawn's Peachy Keen ink. Here I'm adding some Scotch foam tape to the back of that front panel, and I'll peel away the backing and place that on top of my card base. At this point, I thought it was still looking a little too plain, so I grabbed some of that sequin mix and I'm just picking out the really light pale pink sequins. They're almost an ivory, but they have a little bit of a pink tint to them. So I've grabbed my multi-matte medium and I'm just placing a few dots around the card, and then I'll pick out those light pink colored sequins and add to each of those glue dots. And that will complete card number 3. So card number 4 is super simple. This one really made itself. I'm using again my Blueprints 32 frame die to trim out that love sentiment, and I'm going to place that on top of this green card base. And then I grabbed one of those Maggie Holmes puffy hearts and placed that in the center of the O. For a little something more, I'm going to grab my Nuvo drops, and this is in the color Ebony Black. And I just went ahead and placed a little dot in the center of all of those flowers. For the inside, I'm again on a Neenah panel trimmed to 4x5 1/4, and I went with a sentiment, wishing you lots of happily ever after. Stamping that here with Lawn Fawn's Peachy Keen ink. And then I grabbed that floral pattern paper again and trimmed off about, I guess it was about an inch, maybe 3/4. And I'm just going to add some ATG to the back of that and place that again along the bottom of that panel. I trimmed off the excess there and then added that to the inside of my card base. And that will complete card number 4. For card number 5, I decided I wanted to make a shaker card. So here I'm trimming down this peachy pink paper to fit inside my We Are Memory Keeper sleeve here. And it measures about 3 by 4 inches, so I just trim everything slightly smaller. On that panel, I'm going to stamp the sentiment Mr. and Mrs. And I'm again using this VersaMark black onyx ink. And then for a little something extra in the top and bottom corner, I'm going to add some of these beautiful gold leaves. So I've just placed that on the corner, and I'll trim off the excess for both of those. I'm gonna add in some of that sequin mix. And then I'll go ahead and take my fuse tool and run that to close that last edge there. I'm going to go ahead and place this panel on top of a Neenah card base, and I just trimmed down this pink and white striped paper to 4x5 1/4. And then, as you know, I like to make it so that these sequin pouches can be reused or placed in a memory album. So I've added some removable glue dots, one at each corner there. And because this is a slick surface, it helps to take your bone folder and run that over the glue dot just to make sure it's down really well. And then I'll place that on an angle here on the top of the card base. For the inside, I went with the sentiment Congratulations. I'm again working on a Neenah panel trimmed to 4x5 1/4. So I'm going to line that up there, and then I will stamp that out using again that VersaFine black onyx ink. I placed that on the inside of my card base, and then again felt like I still needed something more there, so I went back to that pink and white striped paper and I just trimmed off the pink portion of that, added some ATG to the back, and placed that along the bottom of the card. Of course, I'll trim off the excess, and that will complete card number 5. Here is a quick look back at the cards we created today. You'll find additional photos as well as a full list of supplies at my blog post, linked in the description below. If you enjoyed the video, please leave me a comment or a thumbs up and subscribe for more. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.